Welcome, my dear friends. It's extraordinary to see you. In case we haven't met before, I'm Stephen Clements, a writer, a gamer, and an enjoyer of big brain activities in general. On this channel, I perform dramatic story readings, I provide role-playing game and movie reviews, and I get to talk to interesting people. On this episode, we are going to do a dramatic story reading about a very interesting person, because we're going to be pulling a short story from a collection about the adventures of Baron Munchausen. Since I reviewed the Carol Zeman, The Fabulous Baron Munchausen movie on this channel, that got me to thinking, besides the movies, there are short story collections about the Baron, and they are just as crazy as the movies are, and there's quite a few of the stories that didn't make it into the movies. And believe it or not, Baron Munchausen was a real person. Now, the stories very slightly change his name to where it's not strictly the same person, but no, it's based on a real person. He was a noble and military officer in the Russian Empire that fought against the Turks. That's why the Turks are going to come up a lot in the stories that we talk about, as well as they do in the movies. And he was something of a teller of tall tales. So much so that apparently his stories caught on in the zeitgeist, and so people all over Europe started embellishing on them and making them grander and grander and grander until he's going to the moon and picking cucumbers off of trees and getting swallowed by a fish, only to get out by a judicious application of a bit of snuff. So much to the point that the real guy started getting embarrassed about what all these people were alleging that he did when he was just hyping himself up a little bit. Imagine that, having a sense of shame. And there's a number of these collections out there. I happen to have an edition that was illustrated by Gustave Doré. And while I don't know that this edition is available anymore, it's public domain material. There's all kinds of different editions of Baron Munchausen stories. So let's go ahead and dig into one of these. And I hope you enjoy them as much as I enjoy the overall mythology of the Baron. And once again, anybody that considers themselves a gentlemanly or gentlewomanly person of adventure should absolutely look into Baron Munchausen. The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, Chapter 1. A voyage to Russia, in which the Baron proves himself a good shot, he loses his horse and finds a wolf, makes him draw his sledge, enjoys himself at St. Petersburg, where he meets a distinguished general. I set off on a journey to Russia in the midst of winter, from a just notion that frost and snow must, of course, mend the roads, which every traveler has described as uncommonly bad, through the northern parts of Germany, Poland, Courland, and Livonia. I went on horseback, as it is the most convenient manner of traveling, provided, however, that rider and horse are in good condition. In this way, there is not the likelihood of your having an affair of honor on account of a groundless quarrel with any worthy host, nor being compelled to stop before every inn at the mercy of the postilion swindling you. I was but lightly clothed, and of this I felt the inconvenience the more I advanced northeast. What must not a poor old man have suffered in that severe weather and climate, whom I saw on a bleak common in Poland, lying on the road, helpless, shivering, and hardly having wherewithal to cover his nakedness. I pitied the poor soul. Though I felt the severity of the air myself, I threw my mantle over him, and immediately I heard a voice from the heavens blessing me for that piece of charity, saying, "You will be rewarded, my son, for this in time." I went on. Night and darkness overtook me. No sight or sound of a village was to be met with. The country was covered with snow, and I was unacquainted with the road. Tired, I alighted and fastened my horse to something like a pointed stump of a tree, which appeared above the snow. For the sake of safety, I placed my pistols under my arm and laid down on the snow, where I slept so soundly that I did not open my eyes till full daylight. It is not easy to conceive my astonishment to find myself in the midst of a village, lying in a churchyard. Nor was my horse to be seen, but I heard him soon after neigh somewhere above me. On looking upwards, I beheld him hanging by his bridle to the weathercock of the steeple. Matters were now very plain to me. The village had been covered with snow overnight. A sudden change of weather had taken place. I had sunk down to the churchyard whilst asleep gently, and in the same proportion as the snow had melted away. And what in the dark I had taken to be a stump of a little tree appearing above the snow, to which I had tied my horse, proved to have been the cross or weathercock of the steeple. Without losing consideration, I took one of my pistols, shot the bridle in two, brought down the horse, and proceeded on my journey. Here the Baron seems to have forgot his feelings. He should certainly have ordered his horse a feed of corn after fasting so long. He carried me well. Advancing into the interior parts of Russia, I found traveling on horseback rather unfashionable in winter. Therefore I submitted, as I always do, to the custom of the country, took a single horse sledge, and drove briskly toward St. Petersburg. I do not exactly recollect whether it was in Eastland or Jugeminland, but I remember that, in the midst of a dreary forest, I spied a terrible wolf making after me with all the speed of ravenous winter hunger. He soon overtook me. There was no possibility of escape. Mechanically, I laid myself down flat in the sledge and let my horse run for our safety. What I wished, but hardly hoped or expected, happened immediately after. The wolf did not mind me in the least, but took a leap over me, and falling furiously on the horse, began instantly to tear and devour the hind parts of the poor animal, which ran the faster for his pain and terror. Thus, unnoticed and safe myself, I lifted my head slyly up, and with horror I beheld that the wolf had eaten his way into the horse's body. It was not long before he had fairly forced himself into it when I took my advantage and fell upon him with the butt end of my whip. This unexpected attack in his rear frightened him so much that he leaped forward with all his might. The horse's carcass dropped to the ground, but in his place the wolf was in the harness, and I, on my part, whipping him continually, we both arrived, in full career, safe in St. Petersburg. Contrary to our respective expectations, and very much to the astonishment of the spectators. I shall not tire you, gentlemen, with the politics, arts, sciences, and history of this magnificent metropolis of Russia, nor trouble you with the various intrigues and pleasing adventures I had in the politer circles of that country, where the lady of the house always receives the visitor with a dram and a salute. I shall confine myself rather to the greater and nobler objects of your attention, horses and dogs, my favorites in the brute creation. Also to foxes, wolves, and bears, with which, and game in general, Russia abounds more than any other part of the world, and to such sports, manly exercises, and feats of gallantry and activity, as show the gentleman better than musty Greek or Latin, or all the perfume, finery, and capers of French wits or petit maître. It was some time before I could obtain a commission in the army, and for several months I was perfectly at liberty to sport away my time and money in the most gentlemanlike manner. I passed many a night in play and drinking. The coldness of the climate and the customs of the nation make drinking a matter of more social importance than it is in our sober Germany. And I have found in Russia some people of the highest reputation, most accomplished in this practice. But we were all wretched fellows compared to an old general with a grizzled mustache and a bronzed skin, who dined with us at the table d'hôte. In a battle with the Turks, this brave fellow lost the top of his skull, so that every time a passenger was introduced to him, he excused himself, with the greatest courtesy in the world, for wearing his hat at the table. He was in the habit of consuming at dinner several glasses of brandy, and as a wind-up, he would empty a flask of arrack, occasionally doubling the dose, according to circumstances. Nevertheless, it was impossible to discover him in any signs of intoxication. The matter is puzzling, no doubt, and I was a long time before I was able to understand it, until one day, by chance, I discovered the explanation of the mystery. The general was in the habit of raising his hat from time to time. I had often remarked it, but paid no attention to the fact, for it was nothing surprising that his head should feel warm and in need of a little cool air. I concluded, nevertheless, that every time he raised his hat he lifted the silver plate, which was fixed so as to serve instead of the top of his head, and the fumes of the various liquors which he had drank passed off in light vapors. Thus was the mystery unraveled. I recounted the discovery to two of my friends, and offered to prove its correctness. I placed myself with my pipe behind the general, and the moment he raised his hat, I lit a piece of paper for my pipe. We then enjoyed a spectacle most novel and surprising. I had changed into a column of fire the column of smoke which ascended from the general's head, and the vapors which chanced to be caught in the old man's hair looked like a blue cloud, and he was almost as brilliant as was ever head of a distinguished saint. This experiment did not remain unknown to the general, and though he was a little angry, he permitted us to repeat the practice which gave him so distinguished an air. And so that is the first short story in the Baron Munchausen collection I've got to share with y'all. So we have a horse mistakenly tied to a church steeple because there was so much snow in a Russian village, a wolf who ate his way into the horse that was pulling the Baron's sleigh and continued to pull it while the Baron whipped him all the way to St. Petersburg. And in St. Petersburg, he met a guy who was missing the top of his skull, which allowed him to drink without ever getting drunk and then set the dude's brain on fire. Okay, now I'm starting to understand why he got a little embarrassed at the embellishments other people gave to his embellishments. While there's going to be more Baron in the future, both the films and the short stories. If you enjoyed this, I do enjoy it when people like and subscribe, so please feel free to do that. And if you've got some thoughts or tall tales of your own to tell, drop them in the comments. I'll check them out, let you know what I think. And so, my dear friends, as we part for now, I wish you nothing but the best.